welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, usually all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. We're still in between seasons on the podcast, but I thought I'd give you a little bonus extra episode to tell you about the newest member of the fleet, who I am in today. Peggy's away for some welding at the moment, so this member of the fleet is already kind of coming into its own and doing what we intended it to do. So on today's podcast, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about kind of the car and also some of the struggles that we had in trying to buy a second-hand car at the moment that I'm sure some of you will be able to kind of relate to. So you might remember that towards the end of the last episode of the podcast, we did a podcast episode about kind of Peggy's birthday and about some of my goals for the year to come. And one of them was to get hold of a second-hand, cheap kind of runabout so that both me and Jamie had the option to use a more modern car if either of our cars were kind of off the road for an amount of time. And allow us to kind of get work done more paced out than kind of rushing to get the car ready for the next day back at work. So we set about kind of searching for that car, and we had kind of a few different makes and models that we were kind of looking at, trying out, and I was pretty much regularly on Facebook Marketplace, Auto Trader, looking for kind of any of those cars coming up for sale anywhere and within our budget, which was kind of $3,000 or less, and kind of trying to look for good mileage, good MOTs, reasonably local to us. And whilst we had kind of a list of, I think it was about 4 different makes and models that we thought we'd quite like, we were still struggling. We came across one Renault Clio that we really liked the look of. The MOT certificates weren't too bad, like the kind of things that were problematic in the past weren't too bad. So we went and viewed it, but there was some more stuff kind of cropping up, primarily because it had been sat for a while. So when we asked for a more recent MOT to be done and that we'd cover the cost of the MOT if it passed, the owners kind of were a bit confused about getting another MOT done before it was due. And I'm not sure if they just didn't understand what it said on the DVLA website about how you can get one done sooner rather than the date. But in the end, they said that we've got someone else coming to see it. So we'll see what they say and then we'll come back to you. And we never heard anything more, which was a shame because it was really nice in terms of being quite an unusual colour, which was something I was quite looking for but isn't actually what we've ended up with. And it being a Renault Clio, which I quite enjoyed driving. So that was kind of the first car we went and visited, and then we carried on with our searches trying to find a few others. We had this amazing Nissan Micra K12 style come up that had got the most lovely story written in the description about it being a 2-owner car. The last owners had it for kind of most of its life, and she was now giving up driving and wanted to sell the car. It was really low mileage, kind of brand new spec, and quite a decent price. And we arranged to go and see it, but in the time between us going and seeing it and us arranging to go and see it, somebody else literally just turned up and paid the price, which is obviously one of those risks that you have with second-hand car market, someone getting in there kind of before you. And so we missed out on that one as well. And it's one of those unfortunate things with like me and Jamie's jobs, we couldn't kind of go any earlier in the evening on most days. and so we were having to wait for weekends to go and view cars most of the time. We went and viewed another Nissan Micra K12 that was quite low mileage, and you might remember that was a car that I'd kind of looked into and had driven before because my parents used to own one. And we found another one that was an earlier one than the one that my parents had had. Low mileage, but kind of quite tidy and things like that. One owner from new, supposedly, so we went and viewed it. But that idea that it was one owner from new certainly started to fall apart when the guy that was showing us it and let us test drive it and things started talking, and his story really didn't add up. He had the whole of the original V5, and so had all of the details. They hadn't been kind of sent off and kept by the previous owner, who, from what we could tell, was an old lady, and he was ringing his mate's dad to check up on information that we were asking for, because his mate had used it as a first car for a while, and that didn't match up with this story of it being kind of a one careful owner. And it sounded like his mate had done a lot of the work and MOTs on it more recently, so we were a little bit dubious as to whether the MOTs that had been recent were as clean and good as they looked on the website. So we spent a long time actually after that sat in a Sainsbury's car park kind of talking about it, looking at kind of other cars that we could find, and we stumbled across this one, and it was, to be honest, up until that point we'd have been limiting ourselves to about 2,500, and this one was a little bit higher than we were kind of originally looking at for our little runabout. But it was really tidy, the MOTs all looked good. It did have a few owners, but its mileage was something like 24,000, and driving it now, it still feels like a really new car. Everything's kind of really sharp and works well, and it's really smooth and everything. So we went and viewed it, had a kind of little test drive round in it, and we're quite pleased with it. So we spoke to the guy, and he said, look, I'm going out this afternoon, but if you want to come back, let us know and we'll kind of work around it. So we went and sat in another car park and talked about our thoughts and feelings about the car, and I decided that just to kind of stop the looking and to stop the working, we'd make him an offer kind of below what he was asking for it, and see if he'd take it, if we would take it today. So we came to a deal, and we were driving this car home. So this car is, if you've not seen on my social media and stuff, it is a Kia Picanto, and hilariously, the only reason I'd looked at a Kia Picanto is an old story about the Singer Vogue that I came home from hospital when I was born in. So I was talking to a guy from the Singer Owners Club, Nigel, about the Singer Vogue that I'd come home from hospital in when I was born, and he told me about the time that it was very nearly scrapped on the scrappage scheme for a Kia Picanto. The lady that had bought it off of my parents in the 90s had used it for a couple of years, but had decided she couldn't really keep using it, and she needed something a bit more modern and easy to drive and things like that. So she'd gone to a Kia garage with it to scrap it under the scrappage scheme and get some money off of a new Kia Picanto. And the Kia garage kind of broke the law a little bit and actually said, no, we're not going to scrap this, we'll buy it off you for the same amount of money that you would have got through the scrappage scheme, and we will take it to a dealership to kind of preserve it, because it was a 1960s car that they thought it was kind of wrong to scrap. And so because of that story and the idea that somebody had nearly given up and sent that car to the scrappage yard in the sky, I looked up a Kia Picanto, and a couple of them came up, and we obviously went and viewed this, and we're reasonably happy with it. It's quite large inside. It feels quite big, even though it's a really quite small car. It's still bigger than Peggy to park, weirdly, and I'm finding it a bit harder to get used to kind of the gear locations and the clutch and things being different, and Jamie's finding the same, really. It is a little bit different to what we're used to, but it's come into its own in that Peggy's had to have some welding and some other bits and pieces done. So rather than kind of rushing and panicking and trying to work out cars and dropping me off at work and Jamie going on to work kind of thing, we've had a car that we can kind of just hop into and is an extra on the driveway for us, and that's exactly what we needed, really, just to kind of take the pressure off any work that needs to be done on either of our cars at any point, and potentially protect both cars against some of the particularly salty days over winter. So overall, since having it, we've done, I think, probably about 500 miles in it, and yeah, it's worked really well. Like I said, it still feels quite new in terms of how everything's running. We have had to replace the windscreen wipers, and looked up some Hubnut approved brands for those, and that's made a huge difference to the in wet weather which we've had recently, and I suspect we'll have more of over this autumn into winter period. But yeah, other than that, she's going really well. Hasn't really got a name yet. We're just kind of workhorsing it out, getting used to it, and waiting for a name to come to us. But yeah, it's pretty tidy. I really like the design of this particular Kia Picanto. I did find that quite a lot of change happened between different makes and models, marks even, of the Kia Picanto. I found that after I'd got this car, I'd see a really interesting little car driving around and I'd go, oh, what's that? That looks really interesting. And it'd be another form of the Kia Picanto, which is bizarre, but it's been interesting to kind of see them and spot them about and realise the kind of evolution of the car. But yeah, I think it's a graphite particular model, this one. It's got an interesting little spoiler, and it is all grey because of that graphite name, but that meant that kind of tax and things like that were cheaper on it than some of the other options, which is good because we don't really want to be paying a lot on a car that we're hoping to only use kind of sparingly and in between issues and things like that. But it's got potential in terms of kind of adding a few pops of colour here and there. The previous owners had put some really nice red custom made and fit mats in the car, and they're still in here, so we might add a couple of pops of red here and there just to tie that in outside as well. It was an interesting time, I think, to be buying a second-hand car with kind of so much demand, especially as the new car market is struggling to kind of keep up with demand. And we really came across some interesting things, and it's not easy. It's difficult to kind of work out who's telling the truth and getting to the bottom of it. It's not an easy time for buyers out there. So I think that was part of the reason why when we saw this, we just went, let's get it immediately, and drove it home almost straight away, because it's just so much harder to find anything decent and honest at the moment. So I hope you've enjoyed kind of hearing a little bit about our new fleet member. You probably won't see much about it anymore on the rest of the kind of podcast, and it was just kind of a little update to kind of let you know that we've achieved at least something from the list of things from Peggy's birthday list this year. And we'll be back with the regular programmed series 4, yeah, oh my gosh, next week, and you'll get to kind of catch up with Peggy and a few other things that we've kind of had going on then. So hopefully you're subscribed or following wherever you listen to this podcast, and I look forward to you enjoying the rest of the episodes that I've got to come. In the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.